How to begin a painting. Well, I'll tell you how I begin a painting. Let's just say the first thing that's important is to begin. I know that sounds like a cheeky thing to say, but the reality is we spend a lot of time thinking, and we overthink to the point where we often don't get started on little projects that we want to get started on. And as long as we're good at thinking about it, well, that's just where it will sit. But what you got to do is sit down, and you got to actually, attempt to get your brush out and squeeze some paint out on your palette. Got my palette. See, there's my palette. What a mess, eh? But I keep using this over and over again. It's just an old tray, and I think this had some grapes in it at one point, or maybe some, I don't know, some watermelon or something. That makes a great paint tray. But the first thing I want to do is just pick a color, any color. But I prefer to use a dark color to lay out an outline on my painting. And once I've got that dark color sort of mixed out on my palette loosely, in other words, I just squeezed it out of the tube, and there it is. Then I make lines, and the lines that I make are just a really scant, basic outline. I mean, look at that. 1, 2, 3 trees. And I envision some rocks, and it helps if you've got the opportunity to go out and see some trees and rocks. But if you don't, well, Google it. But I advise going out and seeing some trees and rocks. It's better to get your own images, of course, and better to, well, having the reference, having been out there and seen it, that just makes things a whole lot more interesting. But once I got my image in my head, and I've done a little outline on my canvas, then I'll start to fill in the spaces. You remember paint by number? How we used to have a number 2 and a 3 and a 6 and we followed a chart, and the chart told us what to put where. And that's basically how we learned how to paint when we were kids. And then we grew up and we learned all the rules. But in paint by number, we basically are assigning colors to different little squares and boxes and sections like this, you see. And I'm not working on some super masterpiece here. I'm just painting a simple little painting, just to demonstrate how to get started. So I made these lines out of Prussian blue, and you can use whatever color you want, black or brown, it doesn't matter, purple. And I'm filling the colors in with a little bit of rust and some red over here. Main thing is to get started. Main thing is to stop telling yourself, I wish I could do this, or I wish I had time, or I wish I could get started doing something. I just never have time. That's what we always say. But the problem is we don't just get going and do it. And I'm taking some red now, and I'm just kind of plopping that red right into, look at that big square here. If that was on a chart, that'd be like color number 5. Well, I'm putting color number 5. I use a little bit of linseed oil, and you know, it just kind of liquefies the paint a little bit. Makes it a little bit more pliable. See, I covered all the bases in my little demonstrations, huh? And now I'm going to mix a little titanium white with some of that rusty color. There's that rusty color. Put a little titanium white into it, and then I'll just kind of fill in this box down here. This is box number 6. It's kind of a pinkish tone. Yeah, kind of nice. Been using pink a lot lately because it's, you know, it's just such a refreshing, this color, you know, it makes things, well, just a little more cheerful. And so I'm just basically filling spaces now, you see? These little spaces, that's all. It's not big rocket science here. I made some lines, and now I'm filling the little spaces that I left with the lines. And it's cool because, well, now a painting is taking shape. I'm going to put a little bit of green into my trees. You know, I promise you, when you do your painting, you'll put a lot more effort and time into it. This is just a quick example. It's not meant to be a super finished painting. I'm just teaching you how to get started. See? Take a little bit of green and put it right into that Prussian blue, and well, that comes into a little bit of a darker green, and then our trees are there. See? It's really not that complicated. It's so simple. Now, we've got a sky here, and you know, could be a big sky, or it could be, I don't know, maybe, let's just make another hill off in the distance there. And because it's off in the distance, I'll make it kind of faded, like soft. Oh, need a little more linseed oil, just to liquefy it a little more. That makes it spread faster. And this is what's called blocking in a painting. See, we're not really trying to do a finished painting right here. Now what we're trying to do is just get color on the surface. And we'll worry about finer details later. But we needed to get started. That's the whole exercise here, is get started. And then we can let this sort of dry for a few days and come back when we've had a chance to look at it a little bit and decide for ourselves what's going to be next. We'll make those decisions in the next session. But for now, we just wanted to get started, see? So I'm taking a little bit of titanium white, and I'm going to mix down that background so that it's not quite as strong. And that's how I paint, you know, I just kind of fill in the sections, you know, make lines and then fill in the sections. And then come back a few days later and do a little more filling in. And a few days later and do a little more filling in. After a few days of doing that, you know, eventually you have a nice layered painting. You can do this with watercolor, you can do this with oil painting, you can do this with acrylic, you can do it with gouache, whatever you want. It's up to you. But look at this, how it's taking shape. You have a rocky surface where the trees are growing, and in the distance we've got a sort of a big hill that's mostly grassy. Or if I make some little points like this, it looks like treetops. And that immediately suggests that maybe that's not grass. That's a hill way off in the distance, and those are trees. And so then all of this is These trees. We're looking down on those trees, see? And now let's just take a little swath of white and take a little turquoise. We'll make a nice cheerful sky. And I painted those trees first because they become sort of like the anchor for the whole painting. Everything just kind of works around it after that. The trees are the star of the show, and everything just evolves around them. Just like my painting is here. But I had to get started, and that was key, because once I got started, then it started to, well, talk to me, and it kind of got its talons into me and compelled me to come back and do a little more, do a little more, do a little more. You know, that's the way it is. If you just sit around thinking about starting something, that's all it will ever be, is just starting something. It'll never become finish something. It'll just always be starting something. And your starting something might be carpentry. It might be, I don't know, maybe you're into sewing, knitting. Maybe you're always thinking about that project that you'd like to knit for your friend or one of your kids or your spouse, whatever. But you got to get started, and you have to get over that mindset that says, well, maybe I'll get around to it one day. No, get around to it today. Just get around to it today. That's what you got to do, is get around to it today, see?